Right, so let's look at this video I did the other day. So much for QE. And I found this interesting comment by YouTube user Peg400. This comment, I'd rather go the Japan route than the path of Argentina. That's really interesting as many people talk about that statement or discuss this very topic. They'd rather have a deflationary cycle where, yes, it does suck, but it would suck more under inflation in their eyes. Central planners want inflation. They hate deflation, by the way. But anyways, if you want to actually look at the Argentinian story, long story short, over the past 100 years, they've experienced currency debasement cycle after cycle. They used to be an affluent country where they were the fifth largest economy or fifth best economy in the world, which is fantastic. But what happened was they got off the gold standard. Ever since they got off the gold standard, unfortunately, they have made the wrong decisions. And we have made the wrong decisions as well. We've got off the gold standard. It takes two incomes to raise a family, and hopefully we don't go the third world route. I don't think so. I think we're going to head to the second world route, but we shall see what happens. Anyways, go back to the statement. People say that there are only two choices. Well, there's a third choice, but here's the deal. Usually we don't see the third choice in action, right? And it has happened a few instances in America, and we could actually look at it. Let's take a look right now. The third solution I would call, we should go the route of the American way. And people want to say, what the hell are you talking about? Well, let's look at the Mises Institute, right? This is by Tom Woods. It's called The Forgotten Depression of 1920. And if you want to go right over here, the economic situation in 1920 was grim. By that year, the unemployment had jumped from 4% to nearly 12%, and GNP declined 17%. Notice that they use GNP rather than GDP, which is not the best way of determining overall growth for an economy. No wonder, then, the Secretary of Commerce, Herbert Hoover, falsely characterized as a supporter of laissez-faire economics, urged President Harding to consider an array of interventions to turn the economy around. Hoover was ignored. I'm glad they did ignore him. Instead of fiscal stimulus, Harding cut the government's budget nearly in half between 1920 and 1922. The rest of Harding's approach was equally laissez-faire. Tax rates were slashed for all income groups. The national debt was reduced by 1/3. That's right. The Federal Reserve's activity was hardly noticeable. As one economist or economic historian puts it, despite the severity of the contraction, the Fed did not move to use its power to turn the money supply around and fight the contraction. By late summer of 21, signs of recovery were already visible. The following year, unemployment was back down to 6.7%. It was only 2.4% by 1923. And I don't think Thomas Wood put it in this article, but the Federal Reserve raised the Fed funds rate to like 7% in 1920 or 21. So they raised the federal funds rate. They cut spending, which guys on the left tell you can't do, and the economy turned around. Just like that. And let's look at another example in the 1980s. Okay, now let's flash back to the 1980s, right, under Reagan. Let's read a little of this concept. By the summer of 1981, people had difficulty borrowing money for homes and cars, and many businesses could not borrow money to invest in growth. Automobile sales declined. The economy went into recession. In 1982, business failures were triple what they were in 1979, and unemployment by the end of 1982 was at 10.8%, its highest since the 1930s. In 1982, the economy declined by 2.2%. The prime interest rate reached 21.5% in June. That's right, 21.5%. So you had high interest rates, you had a sluggish economy, and what ended up happening was they decided to cut taxes, and Volcker kept his policies, high interest rates. And what ended up happening was interest rates fell from over 20% down to 10%. In the first 3 months of 1983, the economy had a rate of growth equivalent to 2.6% per year. And the second 3 months of the year, the economy grew as a 10.9% rate. In 1983, inflation was 3.2%, down from 10.3% in 1981. So, if you look at these two examples, right, from Reagan to what happened over here, the Depression of 1920, these economic slow periods were only for a few years in the 1980s under Reagan, and if you want to look at the Depression in the 1920s, is for 1 year, 1.5 years. Notice that the depressions continue on for longer time with more government interference. Notice what happened under FDR's period, right? People always claim FDR as a hero for getting us out of the depression, but the reality was that he prolonged the depression. That's kind of hard to explain to many people, but that's a fact. And in addition, if you want to look at what's going on in Japan, right? They've had all this government stimulus, and yet they're still in their unfortunate deflationary cycle. They haven't gotten out of the Nikkei crash of 1987, 1988, or what was it, 1989, around that time frame. And if you want to look at the United States, we're still in this mess, right? If you look at the labor participation rate, 62.8%, something really low. We haven't seen that in 36 years. Put all of that together. So if you want to go back to the original statement, I'd rather go the Japan route than the path of Argentina. And what I would say is, you know what? I would like to add a third option to that. I would like to go back to the American way, where they've gotten out of their mess by actually cutting spending, cutting taxes, and like in 1920, they balanced their budget. They didn't balance the budget in the 1980s. You still had a lot of, how should I say it, vested interest in Washington, so it was hard for Reagan and his compadres to balance the budget. They did spend a lot on military as well, so that was a criticism of Reagan. So put all of this together, we don't need to go the route of Argentina. We don't need to go the route of Japan. We need to face a year or two of pain, which should have happened in 2008, and then cut taxes, cut spending, get rid of all these rules and regulations that are useless, and voila, the economy would grow. And fractional reserve banking is a problem as well. That has to be addressed, but if that's not addressed, you're still going to have the boom and bust cycle. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later, and once again, I don't have that much time during the week, unfortunately, so I probably won't be doing as many videos if I do any videos at all. So, talk to you guys later. See ya. Bye.